He thought he was interviewing a former action hero, but Arnold Schwarzenegger didn't show up to entertain. He showed up to bury the script. And in 12 words, he didn't just silence the room, he made America question who the dream was ever written for. If this story made you pause, don't just scroll. Hit subscribe, and stay with us. Because sometimes, the loudest truths come from those who dared to speak clearly. You came here with a gym bag and a visa, and now you want to rewrite the American identity. The laughter landed fast. Sharp. Familiar. That studio-trained chuckle, more obedience than joy. Bill Maher didn't glance at the audience. He looked straight at Arnold Schwarzenegger, eyebrow slightly raised, like the insult had already been sanctioned. Arnold didn't blink. Didn't lean back. Didn't offer that practiced chuckle. Didn't smooth his lapel or shift in his seat. Just stared forward. Unmoved. I didn't betray my party, he said, voice steady, low. A pause. Not hesitation. Precision. I betrayed the script. The room stopped. No applause. No nervous giggles. Just breath. And you know what hurts the most, he added. It wasn't even a good script. Maher froze for half a second, half a beat too long. The smirk reappeared, reflexive. But something had shifted. The camera held. Not between chairs, between worlds. Arnold didn't flinch. Didn't relish it. Just existed in the stillness like he had trained for this moment, not as a politician, but as a man who'd lived long enough to outgrow applause. Maher tried to reframe. All right. So what, exactly, are you rewriting? The party platform? The Constitution? Or just your Wikipedia page? Arnold gave the smallest smile. Not the charming kind. The kind that says I've heard better insults from men who couldn't spell them. You don't rewrite America, he said. You remember it. You correct the parts that forgot who they were written for. Still no laughter. A chair creaked. A cough swallowed itself. One producer behind the glass whispered, "Hold on the wide." Arnold scanned the room, not for approval, but to see if anyone was still breathing. They were. Barely. I came here with a visa, yes. And a gym bag. And dreams too heavy for either one to carry. Maher raised an eyebrow. They said I was just a body. That I didn't understand this country. Arnold paused. Just long enough. Maybe I didn't. Back then, I tried to belong by being silent. That's how the script trains you. The words hung. Like dust that refuses to settle. Maher shifted in his chair. So what? You figured it out now. You, the action star turned governor turned elder statesman of nuance. Arnold, I figured out the difference between playing strong and being unshakable. And then, softer, sometimes, the people who weren't born in the house see the cracks in the foundation better than those who were. Someone in the audience whispered, "Damn." Not a performance. A realization. Maher leaned back, crossing his legs like a man trying to regain rhythm. Fingers tapping faster now. But Arnold sat still. The stillness of someone who had endured boardrooms full of smirks. Cabinets full of condescension. Donors who smiled while sliding knives under the table. Silence wasn't new to him. He had weaponized it. Refined it. This wasn't anger. It was a reckoning. He didn't need to raise his voice. Because clarity doesn't require volume, just wait. I didn't betray my party, he said again. I betrayed the script. And the question that hung wasn't Maher's to ask anymore. It was ours. Who gets to define the American dream? And if you're not one of them, do you still dare to dream it out loud? The green room wasn't cold. Not in temperature. But in presence. Like a space designed to host humans but never welcome them. A sleek couch no one sat on. A pitcher of water no one touched. Too quiet, even for television. Arnold sat alone. He wasn't scrolling his phone. He wasn't practicing talking points. He was still, back straight, hands resting on his knees like he was waiting for something heavier than airtime. The door cracked open. Reese, his assistant, stepped in and didn't bother with pleasantries. They sent this, he said, holding out a folded slip of paper. Arnold took it without looking. RNC says if you talk about the border or DACA, your foundation's funding is dead. No emphasis. No drama. Just the words. Arnold held the note between his fingers. Looked at it. Didn't unfold it. He already knew what it said. What it meant. He folded it tighter, crisp corners, and slid it into the inside pocket of his blazer. I guess we're all clear now, he said quietly. Reese didn't reply. Silence took up the corners of the room again, heavy with the kind of weight only betrayal can carry. Not a knife in the back. Just a slow erasure, of goodwill, of promises, of money tied to silence. Arnold stood and walked to the mirror. The kind with soft lighting meant to flatter. It didn't. Not tonight. He looked older, sure, but not in the way that worried him. More in the way people look after crossing deserts. Not worn. Weathered. Translated into something more than skin and resume. Behind him, Reese cleared his throat. You good? Arnold didn't answer right away. He kept looking in the mirror. Not at the wrinkles or the scar on his temple, but into the eyes of a man who once smiled through parties full of donors who laughed at his accent and loved his polling. A man who used to think that building muscle meant building credibility. That if he got strong enough, American enough, quiet enough, they'd stop questioning where he came from. Now they were threatening to take his work apart. Not with outrage. With absence. He exhaled. Slow. No, he said. Then turned. But I'm not here to be good. I'm here to be clear. Reese nodded, but it wasn't agreement. It was the look of someone who knew what was coming, and knew it couldn't be stopped. Arnold adjusted the sleeve of his blazer. Not for vanity. For weight. He needed to feel what was in that pocket. That note. That line in the sand. You know what the irony is, he said as he buttoned the jacket. The same people who tell you to speak your truth, only mean it when your truth pays. He checked his watch. They still had 4 minutes. In the hallway, footsteps echoed, another guest passing, laughing too loudly at something invisible. Probably a joke rehearsed before the taping. Arnold stayed where he was. He thought about the last conversation he'd had with someone from the RNC. A senior donor. Old friend. Smiled through clenched teeth. You've earned your legacy, the man had said. Don't throw it away on a moment. But Arnold wasn't chasing a moment. He was escaping one. The moment when silence stopped feeling like discipline and started feeling like complicity. He turned to Reese. They say it's not worth the risk, Arnold said. But no one ever defines what the risk is. Losing money? Or losing yourself? Reese didn't answer. He didn't need to. A red light blinked above the door. 2 minutes. Arnold looked down the hallway. He could hear Bill Maher's voice faintly, rehearsing a monologue. The rhythm was predictable. The jokes would land. The crowd would chuckle, maybe clap. But something felt thinner than usual. Like the air before a storm. He looked back at the mirror. Not for reassurance. For reckoning. They'll spin this, he said. Doesn't matter what I say. The moment I tell the truth, it stops being mine. Reese hesitated. Then asked, You sure you want to go out there? Arnold gave a half smile. But it wasn't joy. I'm not going out there, he said. I'm going in. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Of tension. Of knowledge. Of something inevitable. The producer's voice came through the monitor. Stand by. We're live in 60. Arnold straightened his collar. Ran a hand through his hair. Not performance. Preparation. He glanced again at the jacket pocket. A piece of paper. A warning. A boundary. And a decision. As he stepped toward the door, Reese called after him, softer now. They'll come for you after this. Arnold paused in the doorway. They already did, he said. This is just me not running anymore. And then he disappeared into the hallway, swallowed by the noise of a show about to begin. What makes a man walk into a room knowing he'll lose everything, just to say the one thing no one wants to hear. Maybe it's not courage. Maybe it's clarity. Or maybe it's the moment when silence costs more than the consequences. The lights were too bright to be ignored, but Arnold had learned not to flinch. The stage had its own language, flashes, signals, blinking applause signs, all designed to choreograph attention. But what couldn't be choreographed was the moment after someone decided not to follow the script. They were 4 minutes into the segment, and Bill Maher was already circling. "So," Maher said, with a practiced grin, "you criticize both parties now. Sounds noble, but isn't that just cowardice wrapped in neutrality?" A couple chuckles from the audience. Not warm. Nervous. Maher leaned forward like he'd found the soft tissue. Arnold didn't flinch. "I didn't switch sides," he said calmly. "I stayed with the people. The party sprinted the other way." That stung. Maher felt it. So did the crowd. Arnold let the weight of the sentence sit. "And in today's politics," he continued, "standing still is the most radical move left." That line didn't draw laughs. It drew silence, the kind where people check in with themselves before reacting. The kind that isn't waiting for applause, just understanding. Maher shifted. He'd been here before, politicians with talking points, celebrities with conscience. But this wasn't that. Arnold wasn't campaigning. He wasn't promoting a memoir. He wasn't even defending himself. He was calling something out. Maher pressed forward. His voice dipped into sarcasm. "You made California a sanctuary state when you were governor. For what? More votes?" Arnold turned slightly in his chair, not aggressive, but deliberate. "I met a kid outside Fresno," he said. 15. His dad was deported. His mom worked 3 jobs, cleaning houses, working night shifts at a factory. He looked at me and said, "Governor, I speak English better than Spanish, but I don't feel American." Arnold let that land. "That's who I signed for." No spin. No numbers. Just a face. A voice. A sentence that shouldn't exist in the country it was spoken in. Maher raised an eyebrow. The audience quieted. Arnold didn't stop there. "We talk a lot about policy. Border numbers. Crime stats. Economic impact. But you know what no spreadsheet can capture." He looked into the camera. The feeling of a child wondering why no one wants them to belong. You could feel the pause. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was undeniable. Maher tried to reframe, keep the tone light. "But that's the thing, isn't it? Feelings. You speak in stories, not solutions. That's the problem with both sides now. Left, right, middle, everyone's narrating their pain. Who's actually fixing anything?" Arnold didn't raise his voice. Didn't bite. "Maybe we stopped fixing things," he said, "because we started pretending stories don't matter. Because they're harder to manipulate than numbers." Maher leaned back. "Come on. You were a Republican governor. You had to make hard calls. You cut programs. You balanced budgets. Don't tell me you governed by storytelling." Arnold smiled. Not smug. Knowing. "I governed by reality. And reality is made of people, not projections." Another beat. The hard calls didn't scare me. What scared me was how easy it was to forget who we were making them for. The air tightened. Maher picked up his mug but didn't sip. Arnold went on. "I've sat in rooms where both parties laughed at the same jokes about poor people. I've heard consultants say, that district's a write-off, too brown, too broke. I didn't stay quiet because I agreed. I stayed quiet because I thought that's what leadership looked like. Strong. Silent. Strategic." He glanced at Maher. Turns out silence can sound a lot like consent. No music. No lighting change. Just a live room where the floor started to feel unstable. Maher tried to steer. "So what now? You want us to lead with emotion? Feel our way to policy?" Arnold replied without hesitation. "No. I want us to stop pretending that empathy is a liability." And then, just barely above a whisper, but every word razor-sharp, If we can't lead with conscience, who are we even leading for? That stopped Maher. Not because he didn't have a comeback, but because, for once, he knew the next joke wouldn't work. The audience sat in that rarest of moments, between discomfort and clarity. This wasn't a partisan moment. It wasn't liberal or conservative. It was something older, deeper. A question that didn't fit on a placard or a segment title. Because politics, Arnold reminded them, isn't made of polling. It's made of the kid in Fresno who speaks fluent English but still feels like a foreigner in the country he was born in. And if that kid doesn't feel American, then maybe it's not him who's lost. Maybe it's the country. Maher leaned forward now. Not for intimacy, strategy. The air was shifting. The crowd hadn't turned against him, but they were no longer laughing on cue. It was time to reframe, remind everyone who the host was. You supported climate laws, protected DACA, spoke out against the so-called election fraud claims. Are you even still Republican? It wasn't a question. It was an accusation with a suit on. Arnold didn't blink. They say I walked away, he said. I didn't. I just stopped moving. A few heads tilted in the audience. The kind of tilt that comes right before someone realizes they've heard something too clean to ignore. And when you stop moving, Arnold continued, the system calls you traitor. Maher gave a tight smile. That's a hell of a soundbite. It's not a soundbite, Arnold said. It's a diagnosis. That landed sharper than expected. Not theatrical, surgical. Maher pulled back just slightly, resting his hands on the desk like he was steadying the room. But it was already tilting. Arnold went on. I remember when I took the oath, he said. Hand on the Bible. Cameras flashing. My voice didn't shake. Not because I was fearless, but because I believed in what I was swearing to. He paused, not for drama, but because memory takes time. I thought of Reagan that day. He said, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. It's not inherited, it's earned. Preserved. Arnold looked straight ahead. I just didn't know I'd have to defend that, on HBO. Somewhere, someone in the back exhaled. Slowly. The kind of breath that comes when a truth cuts through comfort. Maher tilted his head. So you're saying what? Your party left you? Arnold didn't answer right away. He glanced down for a second. Just once. The only time all night his eyes broke contact. When he looked up again, he wasn't smiling. I've been in rooms, he said, with people who used to fight for ideals. Now they fight to trend. They used to quote Lincoln. Now they forward conspiracy emails and call it courage. He shifted forward. They used to say character matters. Now it's whoever shouts the loudest wins. Maher tried to cut in. Arnold didn't let him. I stayed. I voted my conscience. I pushed policies that helped working families. I protected kids who were born here but lived in fear every time the doorbell rang. I passed the most aggressive climate legislation in state history while my party called me a sellout. He paused again. But you know what? I didn't mind being called names. I minded being in the room and realizing the room had changed. The audience was silent now. Not tense. Held. Arnold kept going. They told me, don't talk about the environment, it's political suicide. They told me, don't protect dreamers, they're not your problem. They told me, don't call out election lies, it's not your fight anymore. He looked right at Maher. And every time they said don't, I remembered who I used to be when I said nothing. Maher opened his mouth. Closed it. He shifted again. He wasn't losing control, but he wasn't driving anymore. Arnold leaned back slightly, voice quieter now, but not weaker. You know what party I belong to now? Maher raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. The party of common sense. Arnold shook his head. No. The party of reminders. Of people who still remember what decency felt like. Who still remember what it meant to disagree without being declared the enemy. Who remember what country we said we were trying to become. He let that breathe. Not long. Just long enough. And I remember that version of the Republican Party too. The one that believed in service, not spectacle. In humility, not humiliation. He straightened his blazer. I haven't changed. My values haven't changed. But apparently, if you hold your ground long enough, you end up alone on it. And there it was. Not defiance. Not drama. Just the truth, stated without apology. A man who didn't move, but watched the floor beneath him shift so far, it turned him into a stranger in his own uniform. Who stayed still, and got labeled the deserter. So now the question wasn't his loyalty. It was theirs. Because if you still believe in the oath, but the institution you swore to has rewritten the meaning, who's really the one that broke it? Maher's voice dropped into that familiar, razor-edged register, the one he used when he was about to dismiss something that sounded too sincere. People don't want nuance anymore, Arnold. They want strength. Noise. Simple answers with sharp teeth. He didn't say it like an insult. He said it like a fact. The room felt it. The way you feel a scalpel before the cut. A few people in the crowd shifted, unsure whether to laugh or nod. Arnold didn't shift. He didn't blink. He turned slightly, not toward Maher, but toward the camera. And said it. I carried the American dream longer than those who inherited it, and buried it. Silence. The kind that doesn't wait for permission. No music. No coughs. No host banter. Just wait. Maher froze, halfway into a smirk that never fully formed. The audience didn't move. No one laughed. Because it wasn't a joke. It was an autopsy. Arnold stayed in the moment. Didn't raise his voice. Didn't underline the line. He let it settle. Like dust over something ancient just unearthed. Then, without changing tone, without blinking, in today's America, dreaming big gets you mocked, unless your name ends in trust fund or cable news. One person in the back exhaled, too loudly. Someone else murmured, damn. But most of them just sat there, watching a man peel the shine off a national myth, calmly and without anesthesia. Maher tried to reset. That's clever, he said. But the dream doesn't die just because people struggle. Arnold turned back to him. It dies, he said, when struggling becomes disqualifying. Maher opened his mouth again, but Arnold kept going, voice steady. You think people stopped believing in the American dream because they're lazy? No. They stopped believing because they saw what happened to the people who did believe. He looked across the room, not searching for a camera now, but for a conscience. They worked. They studied. They showed up. And they were told they were too loud, too foreign, too brown, too broke. Or too hopeful. That's the new crime, being too hopeful without permission. Maher tried to laugh. It didn't land. Arnold didn't smile. I know what it looks like when a system punishes belief. I saw it as a child. I saw it in my father's face when the war ended and the propaganda stopped. When he realized he'd been loyal to the wrong thing for too long. He looked down. Just for a breath. Loyalty is dangerous when it outlives your clarity. The studio wasn't quiet because it was polite. It was quiet because people were checking their own timelines in their heads. Their own moments of silence. Their own surrender by default. Maher leaned back. So what? You're a dreamer now. A crusader for hope. Arnold turned to him, calm. No. I'm a reminder. That the dream doesn't belong to the loudest. Or the wealthiest. Or the ones who inherited the MIC. He tapped his chest. It belongs to the ones who keep chasing it. Even when the road is uphill. Even when the hosts roll their eyes. Maher's smile tightened. Arnold leaned in just slightly. Not a threat. A tether. You say people don't want nuance. I say they're starving for it. They just don't trust anyone to serve it honestly. Another pause. Then the twist of the knife, gentle, surgical, and if the American dream needs to come with a dress code, a bank account, and a media pass, maybe it's not a dream. Maybe it's just branding. You could feel the shift. Not just in the room. In the rhythm of belief. This wasn't a debate anymore. It was a redefinition of who the dream was for, and who's been allowed to speak it out loud. So the real question wasn't whether Arnold had changed. It was this: if the American dream has to wear a suit, speak a certain way, and get pre-approved before it's voiced, is it still everyone's dream? Or is it just on lease to those who can afford the microphone? The green room was empty now, just the sound of distant applause being swallowed by walls that were designed not to echo. Arnold sat alone, blazer off, sleeves rolled, hands clasped together like a man not reflecting, but bracing. The phone buzzed once, then again. Reese came in holding it. No small talk. "Fox is spinning it," he said, eyes locked on the screen. Headline reads, "Arnold backs open borders, hates America." Arnold didn't reach for the phone. He didn't ask for the article. He just stared ahead. "Let them," he said flatly. "If the dream needs border patrol at every sentence, maybe it's not a dream anymore." Reese didn't nod, didn't argue, just stood there as the second wave came. The texts started pouring in. Names they knew. Staffers. Donors. Institutions with clean logos and even cleaner silence. "Another one," Reese said. "Conference cancelled. They need to reconsider optics." Buzz. Invitation to speak at Stanford, gone. Buzz. Major funder for the after-school initiative says they're out. Arnold just sat there, eyes narrowed, not angry, not surprised, just remembering. He leaned back and whispered, almost to himself, "They didn't fund me. They funded the version of me they found useful." Reese looked down. "You want me to start drafting a response?" "No," Arnold said. "Want me to post a clip? Clarify?" "No," he stood, slow, like a man who's felt this before. In training. In politics. In private. That particular fatigue that only comes when the truth costs you something measurable. "You don't defend truth," he said. "You live with its consequences." Later that evening, Arnold stepped into a university auditorium. Small crowd. Students. Some faculty. No press. The kind of room where real conversations still outnumber cameras. He stood at the front. No teleprompter. No lighting cues. He told them what had happened. Not as a scandal. As a sequence. What he said. What they heard. What they did with it. He was halfway through a Q&A when a student stood up. Probably 19. Hoodie. Quiet defiance. "But your story," the student said, "it's not a blueprint. It's a miracle." The room held its breath, unsure if it was critique or curiosity. Arnold didn't rush to answer. He nodded once. "Exactly." He stepped forward slightly. "Not to elevate. To connect. My story isn't normal," he said. "I know that." He gestured toward the room. "I was a foreigner. A bodybuilder. An actor. Then a governor. I've lived lives most people can't imagine." He paused. "But if we stop telling stories like mine, we stop believing that miracles are possible." A few students shifted in their seats. One wrote something down. Another stopped pretending not to record. Arnold leaned on the podium, not to rest, but to settle. "Hope isn't dangerous because it's naive. It's dangerous because it threatens control." A few heads nodded. When we call stories like mine exceptional, what we're really doing is giving ourselves permission to expect less, for everyone else. He looked at the student again. "You're right. I'm not the norm. But neither was your grandmother. Or your immigrant father. Or the teacher who paid for your lunch out of pocket." He straightened up. "The moment we call hope a miracle instead of a right, we've already surrendered." Silence followed. Not from disinterest. From recognition. Reese was waiting outside the building, phone still buzzing in his hand. "You're trending," he said. "Again. But it's messy. One side's calling you a hero. The other says you sold out. Some say you're washed up. Others say you're finally who you were supposed to be." Arnold took the phone, looked at it for a second, then handed it back. "I didn't show up to be liked," he said. "I showed up to not disappear." And he walked to the car, his name now echoing in hashtags he never asked for, attached to headlines he didn't write. Because sometimes the cost of being clear is being alone. But it's in that clarity, not popularity, that change begins. So now, the question lingers. When we start calling belief in a better future unrealistic, are we being practical? Or are we just tired of pretending to care? The lecture hall wasn't full. It didn't need to be. The front 2 rows were enough, students half distracted by screens, the hum of campus still clinging to their jackets, eyes wary in the way only a generation raised under headlines could be. They didn't come to be inspired. They came to see if the man on their For You page actually meant what he said. Arnold didn't take the stage. He stood level with them. No podium. No spotlight. Just a man with sleeves rolled to his forearms and time-earned weight behind every sentence. He started without preamble. "Lincoln warned us," he said. "A house divided against itself cannot stand." His voice was steady. Not performative. Not dramatic. Just lived in. The question now is, who's making money off the wreckage? A few students looked up. Arnold didn't wait for their approval. They tell you politics is broken. That the system's too far gone. That it's not worth caring. But what they don't tell you is that someone wants you to believe that. He let that sink. Not a rhetorical pause. A warning. Because if you stop believing, you stop showing up. And when you stop showing up, someone else decides who matters. He paced once, slow, eyes sweeping the room. "When I came here, I believed in the words etched into this country's bones. I believed in opportunity, in second chances, in hard work that gets seen. But somewhere along the way, the slogan stayed, and the soul got Monetized." He stopped. Kennedy said, "Ask what you can do for your country. Beat. Now." His voice dropped. "Ask what your country can do for your donors." That's the new anthem. A quiet groan came from someone in the back. Not disagreement. Agreement disguised as exhaustion. Arnold smiled. The kind that knows exactly what they're feeling. "You're tired. I get it. It's easier to post than to show up. Easier to be ironic than responsible. But here's the thing, every time you choose not to speak, someone else fills that silence for you." He scanned the room again. One student raised a hand. Not to ask. To stand. A girl. Maybe 20. Worn sneakers. Sharp voice. She didn't ask a question. She quoted him. "You don't need a party to stand," she said, her voice firm. "You just need a moment, where silence costs more than courage." The room froze, not in awe, but in clarity. Arnold didn't move. Just nodded once. "That's it," he said. "That's the whole thing." He could have ended there. But he didn't. You won't always be clapped for it. You won't always be trending for it. But truth never needed an audience. It only needed enough people who didn't flinch. He glanced at the clock on the back wall. Class was almost over. He stepped back, slowly, as if leaving space for the words to stay longer than he would. And as he did, a student in the second row scribbled something down on the whiteboard near the door. Big block letters. Marker bleeding through just enough. "Be clear. Even if it costs you." Arnold turned, saw it, and didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Because legacies don't live in headlines. They live in repetition. Quiet. Unforced. Earned. The camera didn't follow him out. The class ended without applause. But when the students filed out, more than a few lingered. Not to shake his hand. Just to stand where he had stood. To feel what it felt like to tell the truth without asking for permission. And maybe, one of them, later that week, in a different room, with no cameras and no microphone, would say something that didn't fit the script. Not because it was easy, but because silence had gotten too expensive. And that was the dream worth carrying.